April 20th, 1945, a cellar in Berlin. Gefreiter Klaus Richter sat against a cold stone wall, holding his daily bread ration. 200 grams, about 7 ounces, less than half a standard loaf. The bread was dark, dense, and spotted with green mold. He picked off the worst of it and ate the rest. It tasted like sawdust mixed with bitterness, but it was food, and food was life. He hadn't eaten meat in 6 weeks. The last vegetables he'd seen were frozen turnips 3 weeks ago. His body was consuming itself. At 22 years old, he weighed 52 kilograms. Before the war, he'd weighed 75. His uniform hung on him like a tent. His cheeks were hollow. His hands shook constantly. Across the cellar, his squad leader divided a can of something that might have been soup once. Watery, brownish liquid with a few unidentifiable chunks floating in it. 6 men shared one can. Each man got perhaps a quarter cup. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. Klaus didn't know that on that same day, 10 kilometers west, American soldiers were eating hot meals from field kitchens. Beef stew with actual beef, fresh bread with butter, coffee with sugar, and for dessert, chocolate pudding. He didn't know that American supply depots in France were throwing away food that had sat too long. Too long meaning 3 days. While he was eating moldy bread, Americans were discarding fresh food because it wasn't fresh enough. This is the story of 2 armies separated by more than battle lines. One was starving. One had so much food it couldn't store it all. One gave its soldiers 100 calories daily when rations arrived at all. The other gave its soldiers 4,000 calories daily, every day, without fail. This is the story of how Germany's food crisis, as much as Allied firepower, destroyed the Wehrmacht. This is the story of hunger as a weapon and abundance as victory. This is the mathematics of starvation versus the logistics of plenty. By April 1945, the difference between American and German rations wasn't just inequality, it was the physical manifestation of 2 nations' capacity to wage war. America could feed its armies indefinitely. Germany couldn't feed its armies for another month, and armies that cannot eat cannot fight. 1939, Germany enters the war well-fed. The story begins not with starvation, but with plenty. In September 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, Wehrmacht soldiers ate well. Very well, in fact, better than most civilians back home. The official Wehrmacht ration in 1939, called the Verpflegungssatz, or provisioning rate, was scientifically calculated to provide approximately 3,600 calories per day. The menu included 750 grams of bread daily. That's about 26 ounces, more than a full standard loaf, plus 136 grams of meat or sausage, 25 grams of fat, usually butter or lard, 60 grams of jam or honey, 20 grams of coffee, real coffee, 25 grams of sugar, and various vegetables, often in the form of soup or stew. This was adequate nutrition, not luxurious but functional. A soldier eating these rations would maintain body weight, have energy for combat operations, and remain healthy for extended periods. German military planners were confident. They had studied World War I. They understood that Germany lost the previous war partly because of the British naval blockade that starved the German population. They were determined not to repeat that mistake. Their solution was brilliant in concept. Take Europe's food. Germany would conquer agricultural regions, Poland, France, Ukraine, and use their food production to feed the Wehrmacht. The army would live off occupied territories. German civilians would receive food from these same territories. It was called the Hunger Plan. On paper, it was elegant. Conquer food-producing regions. Extract their agricultural output. Feed your army and population. Win the war. In practice, it was a disaster. 1940-1941. The system begins to crack. The first cracks appeared not in rations but in logistics. Feeding an army of millions requires more than food production. It requires transportation, storage, distribution, and preparation infrastructure. Germany's logistics system was adequate for short campaigns in Poland and France, but as the war expanded, problems emerged. Railways were overloaded, trucks broke down, storage facilities were insufficient, distribution systems couldn't reach frontline units consistently. By winter 1940-1941, soldiers were reporting irregular rations. Sometimes full rations arrived, sometimes partial rations. Sometimes nothing arrived for days, and units lived on emergency iron rations, canned food designed for emergency use, not daily consumption. The situation worsened dramatically with Operation Barbarossa in June 1941. The invasion of the Soviet Union pushed German supply lines to breaking point. The distances were enormous, the infrastructure was poor. Soviet forces destroyed railways and roads as they retreated. German logistics simply couldn't keep up. Obergefreiter Hans Schmidt, serving with Army Group Center, wrote home in August 1941, "We haven't received full rations in 3 weeks. Yesterday we got bread and some canned meat. Today nothing. We're eating whatever we can find. The locals hide their food when we approach. Can't blame them. We'd do the same." By winter 1941-42, the Wehrmacht's food situation had deteriorated severely. Official rations were reduced. Bread decreased from 750 grams to 700 grams daily. Meat decreased from 136 grams to 120 grams. Coffee became ersatz, fake coffee made from roasted grains. Sugar was reduced, butter was replaced with margarine, when available at all. Worse, even these reduced rations often didn't reach soldiers. A Wehrmacht quartermaster report from January 1942 noted that frontline units on the Eastern Front were receiving an average of 60 to 70% of official rations. Men fighting in sub-zero temperatures, burning thousands of calories daily, were receiving perhaps 2,000, 2,500 calories. Not enough, not nearly enough. 1942-1943. Hunger becomes strategy. As the war ground on, Germany's food crisis worsened. The reasons were multiple and reinforcing. Allied bombing disrupted food production and distribution. German agricultural labor was conscripted into military service, reducing domestic food production. Occupied territories produced less food as local populations resisted or sabotaged German demands. And millions of mouths needed feeding. Not just Wehrmacht soldiers, but also civilians, prisoners of war, and forced laborers. By 1943, Wehrmacht rations had been cut repeatedly. Official daily rations now provided approximately 2,800 calories, down from 3,600 in 1939. But actual delivery was far below official allocations. Frontline units often received 1,500–2,000 calories daily. Rear area units received more, but combat troops, the ones burning the most calories, received the least. The quality deteriorated as dramatically as quantity. Bread that had been white or light brown in 1939 was now dark, heavy, and filled with sawdust or other extenders to stretch flour supplies. Meat rations were often spoiled or of such poor quality that soldiers joked it was better not to know what animal it came from. Vegetables were typically frozen turnips or cabbage, when available at all. Coffee ceased to exist. What soldiers received was ersatz coffee, roasted grain, chicory, or worse. It tasted like burnt dirt but provided warmth, and in winter on the Eastern Front, warmth mattered more than taste. Butter was a distant memory. Margarine appeared occasionally. Usually soldiers spread their bread with nothing or with ersatz jam made from sugar beet and artificial flavoring. One Lanzer, the German term for common soldiers, described the situation in his diary in October 1943. Today's ration: 250 grams of bread, dark and sour, a cup of ersatz coffee that I couldn't finish, a thin soup with 3 pieces of potato floating in it. That's the entire day's food. I'm hungry all the time. We all are. Some men are eating grass. Others catch rats. Hunger is the worst enemy now, worse than the Russians. Meanwhile, American soldiers were eating very differently. 1941-1945, American abundance in green cans. When the United States entered World War II in December 1941, its military feeding strategy was fundamentally different from Germany's. Where Germany planned to extract food from conquered territories, America planned to produce food at home and ship it to wherever soldiers fought. The numbers were staggering. Between 1941 and 1945, American food production increased by 25%, despite millions of agricultural workers joining the military. How? Mechanization. Tractors replaced horses. Harvesters replaced hand labor. American farms produced more food with fewer workers than ever before in history. This abundance was channeled into military rations that prioritized nutrition, variety, and morale. American soldiers received multiple types of field rations, each designed for specific circumstances. The C ration, introduced in 1940, was the workhorse. Each C ration contained 6 cans, 3 cans of meat, beans or stew, and 3 cans of bread or crackers plus accessory items. One complete C ration provided approximately 3,000 calories. The meals included meat and beans, meat and vegetable stew, ham and lima beans, universally hated but nutritious, frankfurters and beans, ham and eggs, chicken and vegetables, plus bread or crackers with jam or jelly, cheese spread, peanut butter, lemon or orange powder for making drinks, cigarettes and matches, toilet paper, can opener, chewing gum, hard candy. The K ration, developed in 1942, was lighter for mobile operations. Each K ration provided about 3,000 calories and came in 3 meal units: breakfast with canned ham and eggs, crackers, fruit bar, instant coffee, chewing gum, and cigarettes. Lunch with canned cheese or meat, crackers, sugar tablets, lemon powder, and cigarettes. Dinner with canned meat or sausage, crackers, chocolate bar, instant coffee, chewing gum, and cigarettes. Every ration included chocolate. Every ration included coffee, real coffee. Every ration included sugar. Every ration included cigarettes. These weren't luxuries, they were standard. Beyond field rations, American forces established extensive field kitchen systems. Mobile kitchens attached to combat units prepared hot meals whenever tactical situations allowed. These weren't emergency provisions. These were full meals cooked by trained cooks, using fresh or preserved ingredients shipped from the United States. A typical field kitchen menu might include hot coffee for breakfast, served unlimited, pancakes with syrup or oatmeal, bacon or sausage, bread with butter and jam. For lunch and dinner, beef stew, roast chicken, pork chops, or other meat. Potatoes prepared multiple ways. Vegetables often canned but sometimes fresh. Bread with butter. Dessert ranging from canned fruit to cookies to pudding. Coffee and hot chocolate. American soldiers complained about C rations. They called them monotonous. They joked about the ham and lima beans being inedible. They grumbled about wanting fresh food. But they were never hungry. Not truly hungry, not starving. They always had enough food, always. The ice cream story. One story captures the absurd disparity between American and German food situations. It involves ice cream. Ice cream. The US Navy, operating in the Pacific, had floating ice cream barges. These were actual ships converted into mobile ice cream factories. They could produce 10 gallons of ice cream every 7 minutes and more than 3,000 gallons per shift. The ships traveled throughout the Pacific, delivering ice cream to combat vessels. Why? Morale. American military leadership understood that well-fed soldiers fight better, and ice cream, more than almost any other food, represented home, comfort, and civilization. Sailors and Marines who had been in combat for weeks could get ice cream. Fresh-made ice cream. On ships, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, the Germans never had floating ice cream factories. By 1943, German soldiers were lucky to get bread. 1944, the contrast becomes grotesque. By 1944, the difference between American and German rations wasn't just quantitative, it was civilizational. It represented the difference between two nations' capacity to sustain modern warfare. American soldiers in France after D-Day received either field rations or hot meals from field kitchens. A captured German quartermaster report from August 1944, found in Normandy, analyzed American food supplies. The German officer noted with evident amazement, enemy forces consume approximately 4,000 calories daily per man. Field kitchens provide fresh meat, vegetables, bread, and desserts. Individual rations contain chocolate, coffee, and cigarettes. Enemy soldiers discard food that would be considered luxury items by Wehrmacht standards. The sheer abundance suggests unlimited production capacity. How do we fight an enemy that has so much they throw food away? That last observation was accurate. American supply depots in France routinely disposed of food that had been in storage for more than a few days. Fresh supplies arrived constantly, and older stocks, still perfectly edible, were discarded rather than stored. The logistics system was so efficient that food never spoiled because it never sat long enough to spoil. German soldiers, meanwhile, were experiencing systematic starvation. Official Wehrmacht rations by mid-1944 provided approximately 2,000 calories daily on paper. Actual delivery was far below that. Frontline units reported receiving 1,500 calories daily. Some units went days without rations at all. The quality was appalling. A German soldier's diary from September 1944 describes the rations. Today's food, 200 grams of bread, so hard I needed to soak it in water to eat it. The bread was green with mold. I ate it anyway. A ladle of soup that was mostly water with a few pieces of turnip. A sliver of margarine the size of my thumb. That's everything. I'm so hungry I can't think straight. Some men are stealing food from each other. The officers pretend not to notice. Malnutrition was endemic in Wehrmacht units by late 1944. Medical reports document widespread vitamin deficiencies, weight loss, weakness, and susceptibility to disease. Soldiers who had weighed 75 to 80 kilograms in 1939 now weighed 55 to 60 kilograms. Chronic hunger affected combat effectiveness as much as Allied firepower. American forces noticed. When they captured German positions, they found evidence of starvation everywhere. Empty food containers licked clean, soldiers so weak they could barely walk. Medical officers treating captured German soldiers reported systematic malnutrition affecting thousands. One American medic treating German prisoners in October 1944 wrote, "These men are starving, not slowly, not gradually. They're actively starving. Many weigh less than 120 pounds. They have open sores that won't heal because their bodies have no reserves. When we give them food, many can't eat it. Their stomachs have shrunk. We have to feed them small amounts gradually, or they'll die." How do you fight a war when your army is starving to death? The answer was, you don't, you lose. Winter 1944-45, the final collapse. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 illustrated the food disparity perfectly. Germany's last major offensive required every available resource: fuel, ammunition, men, and food. German commanders knew their soldiers were malnourished. They knew that starving men can't fight effectively, so they accumulated food reserves specifically for the offensive. For a few weeks, attacking German units received something approaching adequate rations. Not good rations, not American-level rations, but adequate. It didn't last. Within 2 weeks, German food supplies were exhausted. Units that had advanced deep into American-held territory found themselves cut off from supply lines. They began to starve. Some German units, surrounded and out of food, attempted to surrender specifically because they were starving, not because they were militarily defeated. American forces in the same battles never ran short of food. Supply trucks arrived daily with sea rations. Field kitchens continued operating throughout the offensive. Soldiers ate hot meals or field rations without interruption. Nobody starved. Nobody even went seriously hungry. The contrast affected combat effectiveness measurably. Well-fed American soldiers could march longer, fight harder, and recover faster than malnourished German soldiers. Physical endurance matters in combat. An army that eats 4,000 calories daily can sustain operations indefinitely. An army eating 1,000 calories daily collapses within weeks. By January 1945, the German offensive had failed. Wehrmacht units retreated, leaving behind equipment, vehicles, and supplies. American forces advancing after them found abandoned German positions with one consistent feature: evidence of starvation. Empty food containers, improvised soup kitchens with nothing to cook, supply depots with no food. April 1945, starvation in Berlin. The war's final weeks brought Germany's food crisis to its catastrophic conclusion. By April 1945, Wehrmacht rations had collapsed completely. There was no official ration anymore. Soldiers ate whatever they could find. Bread, if available, was measured in grams per day: 200 grams, 150 grams. Sometimes less, sometimes nothing. The bread wasn't really bread anymore. It was a mixture of flour, if available, plus sawdust, cellulose, and anything else that could add bulk. It tasted terrible and had minimal nutritional value, but it was something to put in your stomach, something to make the hunger pains stop for an hour or two. Meat was non-existent. The last cattle had been slaughtered months ago. Horses were eaten as soon as they died or were killed. Rats were eaten. Pigeons were eaten. Anything that moved was potential food. Gefreiter Klaus Richter, who we met at the beginning, survived April 1945, barely. He was captured by Soviet forces on April 28th and spent the next 5 years in captivity. In 1950, when he was finally released and returned to Germany, he weighed 58 kilograms. He had weighed 75 kilograms when drafted in 1943. The war had literally consumed him. In his memoir, published in 1967, Richter devoted an entire chapter to food, or rather, to the absence of food. Hunger is worse than fear. Fear comes and goes. Hunger is constant. It's with you when you wake up. It's with you all day. It's with you when you try to sleep. It makes everything harder. Thinking, moving, fighting, living. By the end, food was all we thought about. Not victory, not going home, just food. A piece of bread, a bowl of soup, anything. The Americans fed us when they captured us. The first meal I got from American soldiers, sea ration ham and beans, was the best thing I'd ever tasted. Not because it was good, it wasn't, but because it was food, real food, enough food. The mathematics of starvation. The numbers tell the story clearly. Wehrmacht rations 1939, 3,600 calories official, delivered reliably. Wehrmacht rations 1945, 1,000 to 1,500 calories, delivered sporadically, if at all. American rations throughout the war, 3,000, 4,000 calories, delivered consistently. Average Wehrmacht soldier weight loss 1943 to 1945, 15 to 20 kilograms. Average American soldier weight change, stable or slight gain. Wehrmacht soldiers suffering malnutrition, 1945, estimated 60–70%. American soldiers suffering malnutrition, less than 1%. The difference was total war capacity. America could feed its army indefinitely at full rations. Germany couldn't feed its army adequately for more than 2 years. When armies starve, they lose. It's that simple. 2 armies. One ate moldy bread measured in grams. One ate steak, fresh bread, coffee, and ice cream measured in abundance. The difference wasn't just inequality. It was the physical manifestation of industrial capacity, agricultural productivity, and logistical sophistication. Germany entered the war confident that conquered territories would feed the Wehrmacht. But conquest requires functioning logistics. Functioning logistics require infrastructure. Infrastructure requires resources. And by 1944, Germany had none of those things. The Wehrmacht was starving itself to death. America entered the war with a different strategy. Produce more food than you need, ship it anywhere, feed your soldiers well. It worked. American soldiers never starved. They complained about sea rations being boring. They joked about field kitchens, but they always had enough food, always. That abundance was a weapon as effective as tanks or aircraft. Armies fight better when fed. Armies that starve collapse. And by 1945, the Wehrmacht was collapsing from hunger as much as from Allied firepower. Klaus Richter survived the war, but he never forgot hunger. In 1967, he wrote, "People ask what the worst part of the war was. They expect me to say combat, the fear, the violence, but it wasn't. The worst part was hunger, constant grinding hunger that never ended. The Americans beat us with many things, tanks, aircraft, industry. But they also beat us with food. They had it. We didn't. In the end, it's that simple. 200 grams of moldy bread versus steak and ice cream. Starvation versus abundance. Germany versus America. And abundance won. It always does."